And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, episode number 40. To all your listeners out there, hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by here today. As I said, my name is Mike, and I'm a photographer, podcaster, and small business owner based here in Sydney, Australia. Each week on the show, I bring you guys along on the highs and lows of my own creative journey and share all the knowledge that I've gained along the road to building my own freelance business. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking all about how I launched my own print store and how I'm going about selling products online. I think this is something that a lot of people are interested in. A lot of people starting their own small businesses these days, and a lot of people would be interested in a little bit behind the scenes. So I wanted to really dig into that, as that has been something that I've been speaking about for the past couple of weeks and thought that it would be great to make an episode on. But before we do that, let's talk about what has been going on for me this past week. And really the big thing that went on for me this past week was that I launched my 2022 calendars online this past week on my website. And that was very exciting, something that I've been working on for the past few years each year. And it was time to sort of advertise them again for this year. So that was really nice to be able to get those back out there. And that was part of the reason why I want to make this episode today about launching products online, because it is something that I have had a bit of experience with in the past few months. So that is really something that I want to speak on. But just touching on those sort of calendars that I did launch, I was really happy with how they went. Obviously, we're only 4 or 5 days into the launch now as I'm recording this, but by the time this episode comes out, that will have already closed, hopefully. So you guys will probably know how it's gone more likely than I know how it's gone right now, but I've been very glad by how much support I've had around that, and really a lot of people ordering them who you wouldn't expect to order. And I've spoken about this on other episodes about how it's always surprising about who you get messages from and who actually orders work from you. And it's always the people who you just wouldn't expect to get orders from. That's always very, very surprising, but it also warms the heart as well. And it's very nice to have a lot of people out there supporting my work and supporting me as an artist, which has been really good. The other big thing that I really want to talk about this week is lockdown ending here in Sydney, but also here in most parts of New South Wales. So that has been a really big thing. And really something that's really struck me is how we're going to stay productive after the end of this lockdown. Because for me, we've had so much time. We've had so much time on our hands during the lockdown, and to think that now we're going to be suddenly thrown back into real life, it's almost a case of, I don't know how I'm going to get everything done in the days that I have been doing up until now. I feel like I've had so much free time on my hands to be able to do anything that I really want to do. And that was something that I spoke about at the start of lockdown, is using that time to experiment in different things and try out as many new things as you possibly can while you've got time on your hands. But I think as lockdowns start to end and as we start to transition back to real life, this is the point where we need to be working out what the things are we enjoyed and what the things we didn't enjoy, and where we can get the most value from a lot of different things. I've been hearing a lot of people, and I've been seeing from a lot of people having started their own businesses online during lockdown, having started their own podcasts, YouTube channels, a lot of different things that would take up a lot of time, but they had time to be able to do them whilst in lockdown while they weren't at work normally. So they've had that time, but it's about now, how do we transition back to work and still maintain that on the side if that is something you want to do, or do we not transition back into work and do we just have that as our full-time job? And for me, it's not that I added anything else to my repertoire over the past couple of months, but more expanded on the things that I already was trying to do, and used time to do other little bits and pieces and to do more of the things I was trying to do. So I've been really upping my sort of production on Instagram and trying to actually get more work out there on Instagram, get more photos up, get more videos up and things like that. Upping the production on these podcasts as well. I added the video podcast during the lockdown. That was something that I added during lockdown because I thought I would have more time on my hands to edit the podcast. So that has been really nice. But it's about, as we come out of lockdown, what things aren't working as well and what things should we not be spending as much time on, and try to figure those things out as best we can. I sort of came to this a couple of weeks ago when I was looking at all my social media, and that had been something that I'd really stepped up during lockdown as well, trying to get on Instagram, trying to get on TikTok as well, trying to advertise as much as I possibly could. And it sort of came to a head because I had too many Instagram pages working at the same time, and too much trying to go on, and I was trying to be in all places at once. So trying to condense that as much as I possibly could, because it's amazing to have as much work out there, and you should be definitely trying to put as much work out there as you possibly can, but streamlining it in a way that is sustainable for you, and streamlining it in a way that you're going to be able to see long-term growth in it, because there's no point just burning yourself out in the first month of anything when you first start because you're trying to do too much. So it has to be sustainable, and I think these are things that people are going to have to come to terms with over the next couple of weeks as we transition really back into normal life. For me, I wasn't going out and taking photos really for the past 3 months, so I've had the time that I would have been spending out taking photos, out being having those adventures to be able to take photos out in the middle of nowhere, I've had time to be able to sit at home and edit photos and sit at home and work on my portfolio and work on a lot of the other stuff in the back end. But I won't have time for that once I start being out there on the road again. So trying to work out where that sort of balance lies and really work out what the things we prioritize moving forward, because I think that is really gonna show, and making sure we're prioritizing the right things. Because I think for me especially, there were a few things there that I thought I really wasn't spending enough time on before, but I've actually found them to be very beneficial to the work that I do. So maybe those are things I've got to be spending more time on rather than the things that I enjoy the most if they're not bringing me as much benefit in my own business and things like that. So really trying to take this next couple of weeks to sort of sit down, and I think some things will fall off and some things in my personal life will fall off as well, in some of the routines, some of the habits that I've had set up over the past few months, and some of those things will start to slide away. So it's about being strict on the routine, but also not trying to jam so much into your routine that you can't be sustainable in the long term. And that's something that I've really had to come to, not only this week, but in the past couple of weeks as well. And so the last thing that I want to touch on before we jump into today's topic is the thing that I was talking about last week in the direction of this podcast. Now, this is episode number 40, and I'm really amazed that I've actually made it to episode 40. It's been something that it's really been not as stressful over the past few episodes as I thought it would be. It was hard there in the other sort of 20 episodes, from probably 20 to 25 or 20 to 30. That was sort of the hard, but once we push past 30, I've been really enjoying these past couple of episodes, and it's been really nice to be able to produce them. And we're still continuing on, hoping to hit episode 50 by the end of the year, and that'll be really nice. It's really scary that we're only, according to that, only 10 weeks away from the end of the year, but still very exciting to see where we can get to with this podcast before the end of the year. So for me moving forward, hopefully I'm going to try to make these episodes a lot more educational, because I think one of the big things that I want is for people to be able to listen to an individual episode and really take something away. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily listen to every single episode, and for heaps of different reasons you may not have time to get around to every single episode. And so I don't want you to have had to listen to other episodes in order to understand, or in order to be able to take something away from an individual episode. So for here going forward, I really want them to be as educational as I possibly can, and to make them, and to really make sure that you've actually learned something from each individual episode. I want you to be able to walk away and say that you've learned something, but I also want you to know what you're going to learn walking into the episode. So I've got to be a lot more clear on the things that I'm going to be talking about in each individual episode, because I think that is important for people who are deciding whether they should actually listen to the podcast. If it's really about something that they want to listen to, then I really need to produce an episode around that. But then I also need to keep that promise that I've then given them up front, because if I'm going to say that an episode's about a particular topic, I need to actually talk about that particular topic through that episode. And so that is what I want to be really structured on, the things that I'm talking about, and so that I'm able to produce episodes that are around a certain area, so that people know what they're sort of getting themselves into when they walk into an episode, or when they start listening to an episode. So that is really where we're going to be heading to moving forward. As I said last week, I want it to be positioned around how I started my own business and the things that I went through and the things that I'm still working on in my own creative journey. So that is how each week's episode is going to be structured. It's going to be about a different thing that I've sort of learnt along the way. And that's why I'm probably starting this week's episode with how I've gone about trying to sell my products online. And I think that is something that a lot of people will gain a lot from. We're going to really expand on that in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really looking forward to this new sort of start again, I guess, in trying to be really more concise in the things that I talk about. And I think hopefully that will lead to episodes being a lot more well produced, but also a lot more well received from you guys. Hopefully, if you can walk away actually learning something from each episode, then you'll be more likely to come back into the next episode as well. And I really hope that a lot of people will stick around here, because I'm hoping to give out as much of the information that I know as possible. And so with that said, let's jump into today's episode, which is all about how I have sold products online. And specifically, I think this week we're going to be touching on how I sold my prints online. So this was something that I did back at the end of August now. About 6 weeks ago, I think I looked up when I was doing a bit of research for this podcast, which is a bit crazy to think about that being 6 weeks ago. But I really want to touch on the things that I did to be able to get that up and running, but also then the things I did to be able to promote it and advertise it and all that as well. So if that sounds like something you guys are interested in, I hope you're here for this whole episode and you really gain something from this. So really the first thing that I put down as something that I really wanted to do. And we're really going to go through this episode in probably steps of the things and how I thought about sort of launching the store. And it's something that I've sort of come about because I did launch my store last year as well. And this was sort of a rejig on what we did then and some of the things that I learned from that and some of the new things that I've tried to be able to put into place this year to be able to make it more successful and to make it less stressful, I guess, on me as well, because I think some of the things that I took away from last year was that it was just way too much stress on me and I didn't have everything organized that I really wanted to. So, and hopefully trying to move that into this year's launch, try to make those things go a bit more smoothly. So that was one of the big things. So for me, the first thing that I really want to touch on is the actual start date. So I picked a launch date for the print store. This was probably the first thing that I did. And I always knew that I really wanted to open the print store again, but the first thing I made sure I did was to actually pick a launch date, because for me, working towards a target, working towards a goal makes me work harder, I guess, in make sure that I actually get to that goal and make sure that it's actually out on that date. As I said, last week's episode, I wanted to launch my calendars a week earlier than I did. I didn't actually get around to launching them on that day, but I was pretty close. I was probably a day late, and then I thought, we'll hang on till the next Friday because I wanted to launch them on a Friday. So at least they were there or thereabouts. If I didn't have a date, I would have gone nowhere near that, and I wouldn't have launched them probably till the end of October, early November. So who knows where we would be with that. So it's important to be able to pick a date, and I really wanted to do that early. But the other thing about choosing a date is that it helps you with all your marketing as well. So you can sort of lead up your marketing to your actual launch as well. It's okay to be able to launch a product really just off the spur of the moment, and you decide you want to launch it at the end of next week, that's great. But as long as you know that it's the end of next week, it's probably not good to turn around tomorrow and just launch something that you weren't sure about. If I have an idea this afternoon, I just think, I can get it all up and going overnight and it'll be out tomorrow and I'm going to spend all the day working on it. That's great, but I don't think you'll have time for other things like marketing and things like planning, because there will be things that you will forget, and it's good to have that plan in place and give yourself that bit of your runway as well, to be able to let other people know that it's coming as well, because I think it's important to let other people in, and so you're not just sort of dropping that on them all of a sudden. And then number 2 is that pre-marketing phase. So once I decided that I was going to launch on that date, obviously I had to do a lot of work to get everything up on the back end, but then also trying to get a bit of marketing done around it. So I sort of teased the idea of launching the print store probably 3 weeks before I did, and I sort of came to the idea that I was going to launch it, I think 3 weeks before. I originally had the idea, I think, on the 1st of August, and I decided probably 3 weeks later, in that last week of August was really when I launched it. And so I wanted to be able to get some ideas out there about it. So I started sort of posting about it on my Instagram stories to sort of gain a bit of idea. And I didn't sort of give everything away in the first couple of weeks, because I wanted people just to sort of not have the full idea of everything that I was working on, but I wanted to make sure that they knew I was working on something so that they were prepared towards the end of the month that something was going to be advertised. And then I sort of, as the weeks got closer, we sort of advertised a bit more behind the scenes. So I started taking photos and started taking videos of me, how I was planning it out on my website, how I was sort of designing the products, how I was working about marketing them, the ideas that I also had for the design of the products as well. So I launched my prints. Obviously, there's not a lot that goes into behind a print. I can't really change a lot, but the actual prints themselves. So I sort of advertised images and I asked people, which image do you prefer more? Which one do you like? And sort of did those things, especially on Instagram stories, where you can make it very interactive and ask people questions on your stories and things like that. I think that's really important to engage with an audience, especially an audience that you know is interested in your work already. So asking them what they think of an individual image, what they think of an individual product, whether they prefer one or the other. It's important to ask them. I think if you don't consider your audience, if you don't consider who it is actually going to buy this work, then you can end up really trying to put something out there that no one else enjoys. And I have certainly done that before in thinking that I like something, but it's not necessarily what other people like. And I think art is very subjective in itself. So if you're not going to ask your audience, if you're not going to get any sort of feedback and sort of base your work around that, I think you're really going about it the wrong way, because you can sort of lose some things there. And yeah, so I asked about all different kinds of things. I asked about what sizes people would be interested in as prints, how many prints they would like to see on the print store, and then in particular types of styles that people would like to see. And I think engaging an audience in that way sort of makes them feel like they've been a part of actually choosing it. I know when I launched my calendars a couple of weeks ago, I sort of gave options on my Instagram stories because I really wanted to see what people thought about which images lined up with which months of the year and which images they thought matched a lot better. I was having a hard time deciding myself, and so I thought, why not just ask on my Instagram stories and just see how many people interact with it, and actually got a fair few interactions and a fair few people responding to that and sort of handing their input. And that is how I ended up deciding on which ones should go with which months, because I was unsure. And so asking people, and then that also helps them to feel like they've been involved in the production of it. So when they've had some input, they're therefore more attached to the product already because they've had input. But also it's something that they will enjoy because they've had input into actually helping design it. So if you can get your audience involved, you can get as many people involved as you possibly can. I think that's a great way to go about sort of launching any sort of product, is having people engage and knowing what it is your audience is actually after. And then the other side of this, and I think this is something that not a lot of people talk about, is that you can use everyone who has responded to any of your Instagram stories, anyone who's responded to any of your things on social media at all, you can use them as an audience as well. So you don't need to collect an email list. You can collect a list based on people who have previously responded saying that they're interested in your work. So if I was to put out something on my Instagram stories and say I'm launching my print store, who's excited for that or who's interested for that, and just add like a slider or add a bit of a poll there, anyone who responds to that, I know that they're interested. If they're actually going to say that they're interested, because they don't have to, it's not something that they have to do. But if they actually take the time to go and engage with that, then you know that they're probably someone who is really interested in your work. So then when you do actually launch the store, if they're not heavily engaged, if they're not responding to your stuff, you can just send them a message. You can just tag them in something. It's not really spammy if you know the person. Even if you don't know the person, if they're engaged in your work, I think they would think it's a nice thing to really remind someone that you have actually launched your store and here it is if they're interested in having a look. You don't need to say that they have to buy anything, but just as a reminder to say here it is. And I actually had a few people who I messaged last time and just said, here's my store, happy for you to have a look. And they were really responsive to that. Actually had a few of them order off the store. So that's really a great way to know who's engaged, to know who's interested in your products, and something that I think a lot of people will skip past because they're too scared to sort of put that out there. They're too scared to actually message someone, too scared to sort of tag them in something. When you know that they're already interested, they just may have not been on Instagram, on Facebook the past couple of days. So if you're going to tag them in something, even the algorithm may not have actually shown them the actual work if you've advertised it there. So if they don't know that it's happening, then it's okay to remind them that it's up there as well. And I think that's a great tactic to use. So you don't have to have an email list. You don't have to have all these other different things. You can just message people on social media who you know have been active in actually responding and being interested in your work before. And then the next thing that I really want to move on to is pricing. Now, this is something that always comes up. I have a whole episode on this already on the podcast, so we're not going to spend too long on it. But that was really the next stage that happened for me, is sort of working out pricing for different types of things. Now, last year, I priced my prints under what I think they probably should have priced at. I was trying to probably sell as many as I possibly could, which was the wrong way to go about it. I should never try to sell them for the sake of it. Whereas this year, I sort of said, well, I'm going to price them at a rate that I think is reasonable. If there's no one out there who's interested in them, well, there's no one out there who's interested in them, right? So I didn't have to focus on trying to sell 100 to be able to make any sort of profit. I could focus on trying to sell 3 or 4 and make a profit still, because I knew that they were marked up in a way that I was happy with them, I was comfortable. And if I didn't sell any, I didn't sell any, because it is a big hassle for me to have to go and get them ready. And I enjoy having my art out there, but I want to be equally compensated for that. So that was something that I really skipped over last year and didn't advertise them at the right price. I think the other thing that people forget is that you want to actually market them at a price that if you do give a discount, if you do give a sort of a percentage off in, say, a pre-sale, or say after the fact, if you've ordered too many and you're handing a discount and they're on sale at the end, that you still want to make a profit even if they're on sale. So you don't want to be losing money if they're on sale. That's not the idea of a sale. It's not to lose money. The idea is to either gain more business at the start if you're doing a pre-sale, or it's to try to get rid of old stock at the end, but you still want to try to make money off them. So you want to have them at a reasonable rate that if you do put them on sale, that you're still going to make money. And this is the trap that I fell into last time, is marketing them at a price that I was probably making a profit, but as soon as I had them on sale, as soon as I put like 10 or 20% off, I was suddenly losing money. So you never want to get to that point. So you've got to really take into account all those different things, and you have to think about how your margins are, because if you're trying to sell heaps of products, then you can probably have your margins a lot below something like me, who's not going to sell a lot of products. So I really want to be focusing on the people who are going to buy my services and who are going to buy my products, only having to sell a few of them to be able to make a profit. So that was really the way I went about it this time. And to be able to sort of work out a price, I sort of factor in how much it is going to be to actually produce the product. So for me, how much it is going to be to print the product, all the photos, to be able to print those, to be able to send them out, how much it is to host them on my website, how much it is for all the marketing and things like that. Now, I launched these prints on my own website. So I already had my own website for my photography and all things like that. I just added an extra section for my prints. So didn't really charge me anything extra. But if you were having to establish a website, make sure you include that in the price of the actual prints themselves, and make sure you mark them up accordingly so that you're not spending money on actually hosting them online and then not charging for that. So at the end of the day, you've turned around and actually lost money because you've only factored in the price of the actual product. There's a lot more things that you have to factor in. As I said, I've made a whole episode about that, but make sure that you're adequately marking them up, especially in any artistic field where you know the price of your work, and you will know if you feel comfortable with the price. If you would be comfortable giving that away to someone at that price, then that is an okay price to charge, I think, at the end of the day. And then the other main thing that I really turned around on from last year's print store launch was whether I included the cost of the shipping in the price of the product. Now, last year, I included the cost of the shipping in the price of the product, which inflated the price a little bit, but I didn't explain that included the price of the shipping. So people were just assuming that that was just for the product only, and it sort of inflated the price, and some people were a bit turned away from that. Whereas this year I've added sort of the shipping costs as an extra at the end, which can be taken either one of two ways. I think for some people it's a bit of a turn off having that at the end because they're so used to ordering things online these days where you don't have to pay anything extra to actually get the product shipped. For other people, I think they're happy with you actually being a small business. They're happy to support you and pay that price of shipping. And if it's an extra, then they know how much that is. And they know that's going straight towards the price of the shipping. So they don't have to assume that you've inflated the price of your actual product. So having that at the end is something that I've started to do this year. And I think it's worked a lot better in conveying where the actual pricing is sort of range for certain types of products. So that has been something good for me. I think for other people, they will include it in the price of the actual good, depending on what it is you're trying to sell. If it's something that's very overly large and overly heavy, I think including it in the price may make people assume that what you're charging for is a little bit more. So you got to show them how much it is actually going to be to get that product sort of delivered to them. So adding as an extra was an easy way for me to sort of go about that and making people aware of what it is they're actually paying for. Okay, and now moving on to point 4, which was the pre-sale. So for me, I wanted to do a little bit of a pre-sale on these products. I want to do a pre-sale on the prints because I know there are a lot of people out there who've been supporting me for a long time, and I wanted to be able to run some sort of a pre-sale and some sort of a discount to give them early access to the product. I think it's really nice, especially if you do have a close email list, if you have a close group of people. I advertised on this podcast as well, doing a bit of a pre-sale just a little bit before the actual product launch. First off, I think this actually gives you some sort of proof that if something goes wrong, if there was an error on the website or something like that, I know the actual supporters that I'm advertising that to in advertising that pre-sale would actually let me know. You know, I know all the people on there would actually let me know if there was something wrong with it, and I'm not confused by who's on there. I don't think that anyone else is on there ordering anything. So if those guys were to realize that anything was wrong, then they would let me know. But it also works as some sort of social proof in the way that if they were to order something, that I can then advertise that other people have ordered. And I think that those people are more likely to order. So I can advertise that people have ordered, and we can give some sort of a review around that. We can say that how many people have ordered. It just gives me some sort of sense in those early days, in that first probably 1 day or 2 day pre-sale that you want to do. So it gives me an idea of how much we've ordered, so we can move in moving forward with that marketing. And then when it comes to the actual launch, I sort of went about it in launching with a lot of different sort of marketing strategies. I think this year I really increased the amount of content that I produced around the actual launch of the print store, and I really wanted to make that important because I'm launching an online business. I don't have a storefront. I can't advertise to people in person, so online on social media has to be the way we go about it, and I wanted to make sure that people heard that it was available. Now in this instance, I only had the print store open for 1 week. Now I'll explain about that a bit later, but that was why it made the marketing so important, to make sure that people heard about it within that 1 week period. I didn't want that week to go by and have people having not heard about it because either the Instagram algorithm, or they hadn't been on the app, or they hadn't been on a certain platform in that week and hadn't really responded to any of my stuff. So I wanted to make sure that they knew that it was open. So I really went heavy on the marketing and the advertising for that sort of stuff. So I released probably 3 podcast episodes in that week. Now I didn't, in every episode, didn't speak 100% on the print store, but I certainly mentioned them at the start and the end of all 3 of those episodes. So make sure that if someone was to listen to one of those episodes for that week, then they would be the type who would know about it, and they would be more likely to interact because they're one of the close people who's listening to this podcast every single week. I also spoke about it a lot on my Instagram stories, always releasing stories around the sort of start of my product launches. Also increased my Instagram reels as well, trying to give me some sort of reach. I wanted to try to get as much organic marketing as I possibly could. I found that Instagram reels was a good way to sort of push things out there wider than my own audience, but not have to actually pay for ads and pay for other marketing. And trying to sort of lean into that was something that I did specifically for the print store launch. I hadn't really done much Instagram reels before that, and that was really one of the strategies. I said I'm really going to go hard on reels, at least for this 1 week. I think I had one out every single day, and they did fairly well. There's a few that didn't go so well, but others really did well, and I really had to experiment on that over the course of a week. But it opened more people up to actually seeing my work through that week, and that was the really important part of that. I also posted about it on Facebook as well, and made a few videos on TikTok as well as that sort of stuff. So really trying to diversify as much as I possibly could to catch as many different people to make sure they know your story is open, because if you actually miss anyone, especially if you only have it open for a short amount of time, you don't want to be missing out on anyone or missing explaining it to different types of people. So you want to be able to putting as much out there as you possibly can. You don't really want to post about it at the start of the week and then just you're not talk about it for the rest of the week. You want to make sure that you're continually adding stuff. So for me, I'm sort of having a look over the stuff that I'm trying to do earlier in the week. I'm looking over the marketing stuff. I'm looking over the posts that I've posted about it. Any of the questions people have asked me, obviously those things I can go back and tweak those, because maybe I'm not being as concise as I could be. Maybe I'm not explaining everything about the product. Obviously these people don't have the actual product in their hands. It's not like I'm walking into a store where they can actually look at the product. So I've got to do a good job explaining it and handing them enough images of it, handing them enough videos of the product itself so that people know actually what to expect when the product does get to them. And if they were to order, what they would get and what they're actually paying for. And then extra to those few sort of organic sort of traffic growth things that I did on social media, also this time, as opposed to last year, launched my products on Instagram shopping, which wasn't something that I did last year and I didn't really see a need for it, but I think Instagram's moving more towards using Instagram shopping a lot more. So I really wanted to get them on there and see how it went, because I've never used it much before. And I think there was a bit of a downside with that. I think once I advertised something as being available in my Instagram shop, as soon as I added that sort of tag on my Instagram stories, on my Instagram posts, the engagement on those posts sort of went down, because I think that's Instagram's way of saying, well, if you're trying to launch a product, if you're trying to advertise a product, we're going to actually make you pay for advertising on that. So we're not going to push that out to as many people as we normally would on your normal sort of posts and things like that. So I think that had a bit of a negative effect, and I didn't, towards the end of the week, I didn't put that on my stories, didn't put the actual product tag on my stories, and I saw the engagement and the actual views on my stories increase quite a lot. So that was something that I did notice, and I don't think it's going to be something that I try to do again. But I did have a lot of people actually visit my Instagram shop just organically from the Explore page and things like that. So I had a lot of people come through there, as I could see on the stats, had a lot of people come through there. So maybe that is a good thing, just to open, but not advertise it to your audience, but have it open for new people who do come into your profile, because it is one of those big things that's right there on your profile. And you can add it on your Facebook page as well. So it's good that when someone first comes, if they want to look at what sort of products you have for sale, that it's right there at the front of their mind. And the other thing I did was obviously run a few Facebook ads and Instagram ads as well. Now I only ran a couple of those. I sort of advertised a few of the images that I had for the products that I really wanted to sell, and sort of got those out there as much as I can to the audience who I thought would be interested in them. And I had a little bit of success from a lot of people actually heading through to my website from those. And so that's always something that I've tried to do in sort of expanding my actual reach to new people. But then also I think if you're advertising on Facebook, Facebook then reward you on Facebook and Instagram by actually trying to push your products more to other people organically. So if they know that you're advertising, they know you're spending money with them, then they will normally do their best to try and help you. So that's sort of that sort of two-way street there that I try to use when I'm trying to launch a product, because I think it's good to be able to advertise, and you need to know how to actually advertise. I'm not going to go into that a lot in this episode, but then also if you are advertising on Facebook, I think then Instagram and Facebook will do a good job in trying to promote your stuff organically. And now the last thing that I want to touch on is why I only had the store open for 1 week. Now I touched on this, that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to do. And this was really for 3 reasons. The first of which was to try to create urgency around the prints. Now, for me, prints aren't a thing that is overtly urgent. It's not something I'm trying to put time into create. I don't have to create every single print each time. I can print as many as I want. So there's no real urgency around if anyone orders that print, because they can say, well, it'll still be there in 3 months and I can order another one. You can just have another one. So to try and negate that, you can either do your limited edition print. You can either choose an amount of prints that you're going to do, and after that, you're not going to print anymore. So that creates some sort of urgency. I don't think I'm in the position to be doing that sort of limited edition print, especially if I'm trying to print a large variety of prints. I don't have that much interest in my work to be saying I'm going to only print 100 prints of each of these different prints. There's not that many people interested. So for me, it was about condensing the amount of time the print shop was open for. So if anyone actually wants a print, they have to order it within this 1 week. Otherwise, it may not be opening until the rest of the year, and you may not be able to get this one because they may not have it on there again next time. I did change up the prints I had on my print store last year to the ones I had on this year. So the majority of the ones that were on last year weren't on again this year. So if you didn't order it last year, you wouldn't have had a chance. So that was the way that I sort of went about that, to create that sort of urgency. But then it was also about the marketing. This is one of the biggest things that I learned last year, was when I opened the print store, I didn't have an end date on it. I just left it open indefinitely. So there was nothing really ending that. There was no urgency for anyone, but there also was that sort of strain on marketing, because I had to keep marketing it forever. I had to keep announcing it to people that it's open. I had to keep trying to push that out there to people. Whereas having it open for a week was a way to sort of not burn myself out. So I could go hard for a week, I could promote it to people, and then I could stop, because I don't want to overwhelm people. I don't want to keep advertising my stuff to people. I don't want them to be annoyed by me by always advertising my work to them. So having it open for a week, if they're interested, it's there now. You can order from me. End of this week, it'll be done. You're not going to hear from me as much. I'm not going to be trying to jam this down your throat every single week, because that was something that I started to burn out on. And to be honest, I didn't really advertise it much, so there was no point having it open anymore anyway. So I may as well condense all that effort into 1 week and hopefully try and convert some more sales in the first week if they have that sense of urgency, rather than just dragging it out to the end of the year and just hanging on for people to order. And then the third reason was that I wanted to have them made to order. So this was one of the big ways that I didn't want to have to have stock in, especially having a large variety of prints. I didn't know that everyone would order every single one. I don't know how much stock I need to have. So I want to have them make to order. So having them open for a week allows me to put all the orders in at once, and allows me to determine how much interest there is and then order based off that. Now, this may not work for you depending on the industry you're in. For me, to be able to get the prints, it was sort of maybe a 1 week turnaround to be able to get them ordered and out. So that for me is pretty good on a 1 week turnaround. I can order them here in Sydney and have them shipped out by the end of the week. But if you're in any other sort of industry, you may not have that sort of fast turnaround time, especially if you're actually making the products yourself. You probably can't turn 100 around in a week, so you have to have some sort of stock on hand. And if you're ordering them from overseas, or if you're importing them, anything like that, you probably got to have stock on hand beforehand anyway. So this only worked in my instance, and if you're in any other sort of artistic area like that, I would highly recommend it, because last year I ordered some stock in for some certain things, and it really didn't go the way I wanted it to, and so I ended up probably losing a lot more money than I needed to if I would have just had them made to order. So that was probably the idea around having them open for a week, and then trying to get as many orders as I could by the end of the week, and then ordering them at the end of the week so that they would be out by the end of next week, and making sure that is advertised well in my marketing on my website, to make sure that people are aware that they are made to order, so that they're not going to expect them, so that they're not expecting them to arrive on their doorstep the next day. So they know that there is going to be a 2 week turnaround. And if they're happy with that, I think most people, in terms of art, I think are happy to hang on for 2 weeks, because it's not something that they need here and now. And so that is all I'm really going to touch on today, guys. I hope you sort of gained a lot out of that. That was a bit of my process in sort of launching my print store. I hope you've sort of gained something from this and learnt from my experiences. I'm going to try and speak about it a lot more moving forward, and I'm definitely going to touch on how my sort of calendar launch went after we hear about it in the next week. You guys will probably know a lot more about it. As I said at the start, you guys will know more about it than I do at the moment, because it is closing at the end of this week. So we'll see how that sort of goes, and I'll speak about that again next week. But I hope this sort of gave you some insight into how I went about launching my print store earlier in this year, and it was really successful for me. And there was a lot of things that I learned from launching, and I said I learned a lot from last year that I launched last year. I learned a lot from that launch. I have learned just as much from this launch as well, and I think that's going to help me propel for next time as well. So trying to give as much of that back to you guys as much as possible, because I think this can really help a lot of people. So I really hope you did gain something from this. And if you did, I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear if you did learn anything from this, if there's anything you've used before that's really helped you, if there's any of these things that you do apply in your own business. I'd love to hear from you as well, because it's really nice to hear from anyone. And I did get a couple of messages last week, which was really nice, from other people saying that they listen to the podcast and they've really been enjoying the episodes, and that I shouldn't be trying to change the style of it. But I'm really trying to focus on making it as easy for me to record these episodes. And if that means trying to stick to a style and trying to grasp where it is I stand, I think that's important moving forward. And so I'm really thankful for everyone who turns up here every week and listens to every single episode. And I hope that I can give as much value as I possibly can on these episodes. And so with that said, if you did enjoy this episode, guys, I would love it if you did share this episode around with someone who you thought would also enjoy it. If there's anyone else out there who you know, if you have any friends interested in launching a business, launching a product online, just let them know about this episode and they can have a listen. If they don't like it, well, it's only a half hour of their time, and I think that they could gain a lot from it and could learn a lot. As I said, I want each of these episodes to be standalone, so there's no need for them to have listened to all the other episodes, and I just want to be able to give as much value as I possibly can on every single episode. But with that said, you guys don't have to share it around, and you can do whatever you want with it. I hope it just gained as much information as you possibly could from this and actually learned a lot along the way. And so I hope you guys have a great week, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye.